Thank you so much. Can people hear me? Okay, yeah, okay. Thank you so much. Good morning. I don't know about you. So we flew in from Boston 2 days ago. I went to bed at 8 p.m. and I woke up at 2:30. So I'm not quite adjusted to New Zealand time yet. This is my first time to New Zealand. It's also my first time to the Southern Hemisphere. So I'm making good progress on my tour around the world. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here. What I'd like to talk about with you all today is the future of Python, because you all are a part of the future of Python. Here's a simple statement. It's nice to be popular. This was probably true in middle school and high school. It's true for programming languages too, for a lot of reasons. It's nice to be popular because there are jobs in the language. There are other people you can work with on the language. You can find libraries for things that you're working on. Being popular is really important for a programming language, and it's really hard to stay popular over time. Now, I think that by a lot of different metrics, Python is a popular programming language right now. We can even look at some of them. Here are some stats from GitHub. Python is easily one of the top 4 languages on GitHub. There are a lot of repositories written in Python. There are a lot of people writing Python code on GitHub. So that's pretty good. But if you had to measure programming language popularity, how would you do it? Because there are a lot of different ways. I mean, it's hard, and different ways give you different answers for sure. So here's one way, outside of GitHub. There's a long-standing project called the Popularity of Language Index. And what it does is it considers itself a leading indicator. What it does is it uses Google Trends, and it pays attention to how many people are searching for tutorial programming language over time. So according to that metric, here's how Python is doing, at least for September. Python's doing pretty well. It's even becoming more popular as of September, based on this leading metric. That's pretty good. We can also look at this data over time. It's sort of hard to see who's who. Here's Python in pink. This is a pretty nice looking rise for Python. That looks good. That looks like a strong language continuing to gain in popularity. Let's annotate a couple more of these just to get a sense of where we are in this space. And this is a pretty fascinating graph. If you had to guess what languages are the most popular right now based on this leading metric, I don't know if you would have guessed Java. I don't know what you would have thought about PHP. Look at Ruby. Ruby had a trajectory very similar to Python several years ago, and we have diverged. Look at Perl. Perl is like the cautionary tale of this slide about being really careful about investing in community, right? This is something for us to pay attention to if we care about Python being successful going forward. But this is just one way of looking at popularity. What about another one? This is another really famous popular one, the TIOBE index. What this one does is it looks at how many search results are available for various topics for your programming language. According to this, Python is doing okay, not as good, and it actually experienced a slight decline recently. So this is less of the monotonically increasing and great rise of the pink line on the previous graph. And we can zoom out again on the historical data for more languages here. And the stories are similar. But if you look at all of these lines, Python is doing okay. But if you look at all of these lines, what these graphs all tell me is that it's really hard to be a popular programming language over time. And we should use these older languages that have been popular for a long time as a guide for what is likely to happen to most programming languages if you're not very careful about reinvesting in them. It's nice to be popular now, but what about the future? What about the future of Python? So it's hard to predict the future. It's hard to predict what is going to be important in computing, important for end users of Python, important for users of computing technologies in 10 years, in 5 years, frankly, even 2 years from now. And there are a lot of options, right? I mean, everything from innovations on the hardware that we run, the devices that we run, languages that develop, what becomes popular, trends over time. It's very hard to predict this stuff. But I've pulled out 4 topics that I think would be interesting for us to explore for the next 45 minutes together. Areas where I think it is worth investing time in Python. So I have a question for you. Here's a game. Okay, here's a fill in the blank game. Okay, here's a sentence. You tell me what the blank is. Learning to program in Python on Windows is... Okay, so definitely I would say that the average tone of the audience was negative on that one. And I might say that it's complicated, there are a lot of steps, that it's confusing, that it's infuriating, or maybe I just don't want to deal with it. And I personally feel a lot of this, so this is a Mac. My primary computing environment, well, this is really a glorified SSH terminal. I mostly develop on Linux, but, and that's true, I think, for a lot of Python developers, a lot of folks in this room. But I do a lot of teaching of Python to beginning programmers. And there are a lot of beginning programmers who are Windows users. And so I experience firsthand on a regular basis what they experience as new programmers. There's this workshop that I help organize in Boston called the Boston Python Workshop that is expressly for first-time programmers. And here are some of the things that we've learned that we have to address with these beginners that are often not addressed in tutorials, in other workshops, in official language guides. Here are some of these things, and see if you can predict these things. These are things that you've forgotten that you even have to know to learn how to program. Like installing Python is like, go to the downloads page on python.org and see if you could figure out as a beginner what the right thing to download is. Like that step number one is already hard. On Windows, right, exactly. I mean, exactly. So, which is why it's important for us to cover this with them, because they're not getting that from the official Python.org tutorial for sure. They're not getting this information on the download page. Once you've downloaded it on Windows, I hope you're comfortable setting your environment variable, setting your path. You may not have a text editor installed that is appropriate for editing code. And you may try to do it in Notepad. We'll see what happens if you do that. Probably nothing good. Definitely it happens if you don't guide people in the right direction first. Basic command line navigation. Sophisticated Python programmers have different ways of doing things, but and you might have an IDE, you might have a more sophisticated workflow, but in general, you need to know some command line navigation to run your programs and to install libraries, right? Who's teaching you that? And let us not forget that you don't even have a C compiler on OS X or on Windows off the bat. So if you're a kid, you're a 10-year-old kid, you heard that you could program games in Python. And you Google for Python game development. I mean, good luck that you divine this stuff in addition to the actual meat of learning how to program. So this is a lot of stuff, right? This is a lot of baggage. And we haven't even gotten to learning how to program yet in Python. Now, you might be asking here, well, okay, you've sort of presented a pretty negative case, because there are other ways of doing things. You could install the nthought Python distribution, and that would take care of a lot of this stuff for you. This would take care of dependencies for you. Maybe you're using idle, maybe you're using a nice IDE like PyCharm. But I'm going to argue that the default case in Python needs to be strong as well, because nobody is telling you to go install the nthought Python distribution, right? When you're a 10-year-old kid and you Google for Python, you're going to do whatever the downloads page tells you to do, and it's not telling you to do any of these things. And I want to pick on idle for a moment, just in particular, because idle is built into core Python, right? There was a really interesting blog post a couple of years ago by this guy, Al, who has spent a lot of time teaching people to program in Python. He's written more than two, but he's written, in particular, these 2 books on developing games in Python, focusing on kids. And he has a sort of heartbreaking blog post called "The Things I Hate About Idle That I Wish Someone Would Fix." And there's a poignant quote from a Python core developer in the comments on this blog post that basically says, the problem is that idle is not maintained by anyone. So these bugs exist because nobody feels like it's their personal investment that idle succeeds. And I think this is a good microcosmic example of sort of the state of Windows development in Python in general. There are very few core developers, there are very few sort of regular Python contributors who use Windows regularly relative to the total number of contributors. And when that's true, you don't have a lot of people personally invested in the success of these things. And that means the bandwidth is small for maintaining the status quo, let alone innovating. I want the blank to be filled in like this. So I guess my question for you is, if you could do whatever you wanted, if you could snap your fingers and you could get whatever you wanted to make developing on or for Windows delightful, what would you do? Here are a couple of statistics that might be interesting. Python is a big project. And in that respect, these statistics are kind of great. A ton of people have contributed in some capacity to Python. These numbers reflect comments on bugs. So I would say this is sort of the most basic level of contribution to core Python, is you've at least commented on or opened a ticket about something. And we have over 41,000 people who have taken the time to try to improve Python. That's awesome. That is a ton of people. 41,000 people, that is a lot. We've had 30,000 bugs in the lifetime of bugs.python.org. And most of them get squashed. There aren't that many open bugs, given the total number that we've had. But then look at the right column. It's much smaller, right? And what I read from this, you could interpret this differently, but my interpretation of this is that probably Windows bugs are underreported and underinvestigated, and only by people who really sort of have to. Because there isn't an ecosystem in which, this is like real slog work, and very few people actually benefit from the results. In the last 30 days, so a good solid month of development for Python, 21 people made 39 comments on 22 Windows tickets. So I'm looking out in the audience here. How many people are here? There are like 250 plus people who signed up for Kiwi PyCon. What if each one of you, even if you don't use Windows, I don't care, do it for the children. What if each of you investigated a single Windows bug? Bite the bullet and do it. We'd wipe these out, right? We would blow this statistic away. We are dealing with absolute numbers so small that a dedicated group like you all could make a huge difference. So if I had a genie, if I could make a wish, I would rub that lamp and I would say, I want everyone out here in this audience, and me, I hold myself accountable too, to take the time to invest in this. We need to increase the bandwidth so that we can not only maintain the status quo for Windows, which is only okay, and to give us the bandwidth to actually experiment and to do something revolutionary. All programming languages deal with the fact that getting started is really hard. What if Python blew the competition out of the water on Windows and on all platforms? We could do it. We just have to decide that we want to. Right? So we could choose to do nothing. We could choose the status quo. There are a lot of Python core developers who do phenomenal work for Python. They're doing so much already that they don't have the time to do all of it themselves. We need new people, right? We need you all to be a part of this. So you can choose to do nothing, or you can choose to do something. I would like us to think about, at least, doing something for the state of Windows for Python. I have another question for you. Why aren't more games developed in Python? Actually, I have a question. Raise your hand if you have written a game in Python. You've used Pygame, you've dabbled, whatever, okay? A few hands. Raise your hand if you've made a game for money in Python. One person, okay. Cool. Very cool. Yeah, so Python has a lot of really interesting sort of flagship libraries. I hear all the time from kids, I want to make games in Python. This is a really popular introduction to the language. And we have good libraries. What is the deal here? What is the discrepancy between people getting started with these libraries and it being sort of a real language for doing game development? Good old Wikipedia. There's actually a Wikipedia page for games, like games that you could actually go out and download and pay money for, that use Python in some capacity. That page is pretty small. This is actually all of the games on that page. Has anyone played any of these? Civ 4, Civ 4 is definitely a popular game. Okay, my husband's like, I play Civ 4. Okay, Frets on Fire is notable on this list for being entirely in Python. And part of the deal for Frets on Fire was that it was an experiment, and if that's even possible. A lot of these games use Python for behavior scripting. You can mod the game using Python. Very cool. It's cool that there's this nascent ecosystem, but this is pretty small. If you look at the page on Lua, it's much larger, right? So why is this? Okay, well, let's check out the situation in the wild. There's a game development jam that happens a couple of times a year called Ludum Dare. Has anyone here done that? A couple of people? Yeah, okay, great, awesome. And actually one of them just ran recently. And I'd like to share with you the competition tips from this weekend game jam. Let me highlight parts of this for you. You should try to develop for the web if you can. If not the web, Windows. You should definitely have self-contained downloads. Don't use Python or Pygame or no one's going to use your game. This is a phenomenal anti-recommendation for using Python to develop games. This is pretty sad. But okay, these are just tips. Let's see how it actually plays out. Okay, so the most recent game jam ran just a couple of weeks ago. How did it go? All right, well, there are a little over 2,200 entries. A mere 1.3% were in Python, just 29. And actually, 29 is small enough that I took the liberty to go look up all of those games and see how they went. Here are some choice quotes from the most recent game jam. I think this will probably be my last attempt at running Python as a game design language, as the support just really isn't there. Or, from a perspective evaluator of one of the games, installing Python is just not going to happen. Sorry. I saw distribution woes. People trying to package standalone apps for Windows just doesn't work. Didn't work for everyone. Python 2 versus 3 confusion. A good faith attempt to install a game to be able to evaluate it, and not knowing the full story here, not knowing what's going on, not being able to resolve this error. And then there were just, in general, sort of bugs, often on Windows, like 32 versus 64-bit issues, all kinds of unfortunate things in various game libraries. So this is, of the 29, I've showed you a couple of slides full of comments. This isn't even all of them. I would say at least half of the 29 entries had comments to these effects. So that's pretty bad. Tough crowd, right? Why are there so many issues? A lot of this is installation friction. A lot of people were like, no, I'm not installing Pygame. Good luck. Clearly, developing a standalone Windows executable is too hard for people to want to do or do successfully. There's confusion that happens outside of the game development ecosystem. Python 2 versus 3 confusion happens throughout the Python ecosystem. This is a real source of confusion for potential new developers in the language. And then we saw some buggy libraries issues. And if I could pick on the standalone executables thing for a second, this is interesting because none of these 4 points are impossible, right? Like, it's not impossible to figure out if you need to use Python 2 or 3. It's not impossible to install Python and Pygame. It's possible to develop a standalone executable on Windows for your game. There are many options for it. The problem is that it's clearly not commonly enough done, that there's a ton of friction, and there are a lot of edge cases that have not been smoothed over yet. This is a sign of an ecosystem that is still really small, and it needs people to help it grow and to smooth over these road bumps. But okay, so this was a 48-hour game jam. Things are crazy, you've got a lot going on. What if we talk to the experts? There aren't that many. So I took the liberty of emailing a bunch of them to ask them their thoughts on this. And I got back some really nice, thoughtful responses. I'd like to, in particular, highlight a conversation that I had with Sammy, who is the lead developer on Frets on Fire. And he had some really good, positive feedback for us. Python is the perfect tool for gluing the parts together to make a game. Awesome, that's great. We didn't have issues with the performance of Python. We were able to iterate quickly. That was an indispensable tool. The things that you and I love about Python is this beautiful, flexible language that you can do things in quickly and it's easy to iterate. These things are all true for game developers as well. So okay, what are our shortcomings? Why aren't people developing games in Python? Well, as it turns out, the pros have the exact same problems as the amateurs. Right? If this is such a serious problem, it would be great if we could address it. And a couple of other thoughts. And there's a lot of, he had a lot of commentary on and comparisons to Lua as a game scripting language. What these comments boil down to for me, though, is, again, this idea that what we need to do is infuse some blood and some energy into the Python game development ecosystem. We just need more people doing it, finding the bugs, hitting those pain points, opening the bug tracker tickets, and making things better just by sheer volume of going through the experience together. And in fact, some people do this. There's a thing called PyWeek. Who's done PyWeek? Small number of people, okay, but PyWeek is sort of like the previous game jam, Ludum Dare. It's a week-long game writing competition specifically for Python. It's smaller. There are a couple dozen entries every time this happens. One's actually happening right now. You could go check out the theme and the competition right now. And it has very noble goals that are very in line with the things we would like to see to make this ecosystem stronger. You just need more eyeballs doing, you need more eyes on the libraries, you need more people going through the experience of writing and distributing games. So PyWeek is a great first step that all of us could take to build up this ecosystem. So again, I ask you, you may say, well, I'm not a professional game developer, and I don't aspire to be a professional game developer. I am personally not a professional game developer. But I think that it is important for Python to be competitive in this space. I think it could be. It has a lot of great language qualities that make it a good contender in this space. We need to support the ecosystem, though. So you could do PyWeek. You could do Ludum Dare. Write a game with your kids some weekend. You could be a part of making this better, even if you're not a professional game developer. So I have another question for you. Can I build mobile apps in Python? And true story, I had the great honor and pleasure of working with a nonprofit that was teaching young women in Haiti how to program. And they invited me to do a series of Skype sessions to teach an intro to Python class to this group of young women. Now, A, it's awesome that this is even possible. Like, it's amazing that in our day and age, you can use Skype to talk to people on the other side of the world and teach them a programming language and share in that experience together. I mean, that's amazing, that's awesome. But the very first question that I got about the language from this group of young women was, can I build mobile apps? And their reasons for this were very serious. They wanted to build mobile apps because a lot of people have phones and they don't have good computers, and they wanted to develop applications that would help connect people post-natural disaster. Right? So for them, this is a very serious question. And what am I supposed to say? Kiwi. Spoiler alert. So in general, nobody does this. Right? Like, raise your hand if you have written a mobile app in Python. Right? So there are literally, just for the camera, no hands were raised. But spoiler alert from the other keynote speaker, there are actually several libraries that make this possible. This is not impossible. It is possible to develop mobile apps, mobile games in Python. I'd say the leading contender right now is a library called Kivi, which allows you to build multi-device, cross-platform, multi-touch applications. Here's an example of one of them. You can even go buy things in the Android or the Google Play Store, in the Mac OS X App Store. You can pay money for an app that was written in Python. The problem is that these are like the only two, right? So this is exactly the same situation, only even more nascent, as game development. We have libraries. They're in the beginning stages. They need eyeballs. They need people stress testing them. I want to be able to browse hundreds, thousands of Python apps in the App Store. We need to broaden the ecosystem, because the only way to get competitive, the only way to build out an ecosystem such that people would answer the question, yes, it is possible to build mobile apps in Python, is to have lots of people doing it. First as hobbyists and then for money, right? So again, you don't have to be a professional mobile app developer, but this would be a good investment. This would be a good investment that you could make in the broader Python community to spend a week, spend a weekend building something fun in Python for your Android or your iOS device. We could do nothing, But guess what? The number of mobile apps is going up. Okay, it's not going away. So I've been kind of harshing on Python for the last couple of minutes. Let me ask a happier question. Why is Python so popular in the sciences? It is super popular in the sciences. And there are a lot of really good reasons for this. We have some killer libraries. NumPy, SciPy, IPython. The IPython notebook is a killer app. It is a game changer. I talked to an MIT PhD a couple of weeks ago who said that IPython notebook changed her life. It took a year off of her thesis. She used to just have Excel spreadsheets that she would type things into and then copy them over, and then it was horrible. And you couldn't share it, and it wasn't versioned, and you didn't know what was going on. IPython notebook changed her life. There are really strong scientific Python distributions, like mthought. We talked about that before. If you're in the know, if you know for your science stuff, if your department knows about mthought, this could be a really great way to get all of these complicated libraries installed on your Windows or OS X machine. Python is a really strong language interoperability store. If you need to run Fortran code, you can do that from Python. Right? We have all of the hooks in place. And then on top of that, all of the things that you and I love about Python, scientists love about Python. Right? They love that it's this flexible language that's very fast to develop in. So there are a lot of really good reasons for Python to be popular in the sciences. There's also another thing going on that's really interesting. It's this thing called software carpentry. Has anyone heard of software carpentry before? A couple of people, a bunch of people, great, awesome. Software carpentry is a program with a mission to make scientists more productive by teaching them basic computing skills. Here are some of the things that they teach. Version control, using the shell, interacting with databases, writing tests, testing what you're writing, automation. This is really awesome core software engineering and open source development material that is being taught to scientists around the world in Python. Not in R, not in MATLAB, not in Mathematica, in Python. Here are just some of the upcoming events that are happening. We have paleontologists, bioinformaticists, environmental scientists. All kinds of people are using Python as their introductory language to these really amazing skills all over the world, actually one in New Zealand. And this is really exciting, okay? Software carpentry is on a mission to make open access possible. We talk about being frustrated by the fact that scientists don't have reproducible research. They don't share anything. You have to pay all this money for access to journal articles. But it's not really any wonder that this is the state of the world. If you and I wanted to share our research, but you didn't know about version control, and you didn't know a programming language, you didn't know how to automate any of this, you didn't know how to interact with databases, you probably have an Excel spreadsheet that you and I have been shunting around together. I mean, of course, that's not a recipe for reproducible data. But what we have going on right now is hundreds, thousands of scientists learning the tools that make open access possible, and they're learning them in Python. This is really, really, really exciting. And I think that we should help do it. We've sort of lucked into this. It is cool that the people who happen to run software carpentry happen to like Python. But this is an opportunity to revolutionize the way that science happens. And we shouldn't take a passive approach here. We should dig in. We should make this happen everywhere. Okay, so we've talked about 4 big topics. We've talked about Windows, we've talked about games, we've talked about mobile, we've talked about science. And in a lot of these cases, we've talked about the fact that you may not be a professional scientist, you may not be a professional game developer, you may not personally use Windows. So how exactly, Jessica, am I supposed to help with this stuff? Well, there are a lot of ways. And it's not just you, you're not alone in this. The killer feature of the Python community, is often underappreciated, is the Python Software Foundation. Python is the only language that I know of that has this type of supporting infrastructure. The Python Software Foundation is a nonprofit. It has the ability to collect and distribute money to reinvest in the community. It can be a stewarding organization for the community and the language. It takes care of trademark stuff. This is a really unique organization in a unique and growing community that we should capitalize on together. You all can capitalize on the existence of the Python Software Foundation. Here are some examples. Mentioned yesterday, have you ever wanted to contribute to Python, core Python? Who has? Who in here has contributed to the core Python, CPython? A couple of hands. Who wants to? Who's wanted to but has never been really sure how to do it? Yeah, there's a thing just for you. It's called pythonmentors.com. Go there right now. This is full of friendly people who will help you get started with Python core development. When we looked at those bug counts earlier, you can be a part of reducing those counts. You can work on Windows. You have the tools that you need, and you have the people there to support you on this website. So if you've always wanted to contribute to Python, hey, make this weekend the weekend. You could run a sprint on your favorite library. Is there a bug in Django you've been wanting to fix forever? You want to get into Kivi, you want to get into Pygame. We'll pay for your food. Get people together, buy some pizza, run a sprint on your favorite library, run a sprint on the core language. This is a great opportunity. Help strengthen the community itself. Run an intro workshop. Start a PyLadies chapter. Start a user group in your city. The PSF has the tools to make this possible with you. We can help you financially. We can help you with people and with resources. We can connect you with the things that you need. And if you don't do these things, no one else is magically going to do it. The people who start user groups, the people who start libraries, the people who make IPython Notebook, they don't have some magic superpower. These are just people like you and me in the community who decided to commit to something. So you can do this too, and I hope that you do. We can also give you cash dollars to work on projects. This is an example of a $10,000 grant to PyPy to extend this development. If you have the next great idea, the PSF can help make it happen. So I'd like to issue a challenge to you all, you and me, us here together at Kiwi PyCon. This year, 2013, how about this? What if each of us commits to one technical thing? Fix a bug in core Python. Do PyWeek. Make a mobile app and report the bugs that you find. Commit to one technical thing that gives back to the community. And commit to one community thing. Run an intro workshop. Help out, volunteer with your user group. Start a PyLadies chapter. Something that will invest back in the non-technical portions of the community. If each of us did one of these two things, we would collectively make an enormous difference in the global Python community. It just takes us all doing our bit together, right? So we talked about 4 big topics. We've talked about some things that you can do. So to recap, you can fix bugs in Windows, even if you don't primarily run Windows. You can teach a workshop that lets you experience firsthand how painful this is. You can develop a game. You can do PyWeek. You can build a mobile app. You can submit bug reports. You could volunteer with software carpentry. There are tons of universities here in New Zealand that have first-year students who don't even know that if they learn this stuff, they learn version control, they learn some Python, it will change their lives. It will change their research careers. You can be a part of that. So, of course, we can choose to do nothing. We can choose the status quo, but I invite you to join me in choosing an active stance on the future of Python, because the current state of Python is very bright. Python is awesome. Python is successful. Python is growing. But we have to invest. We have to capitalize on this popularity if we want Python to stay popular in the future. So that is my call to action for all of you for the rest of this weekend, for the rest of this year. And that's it.